The rope burned against Evangeline's wrists as she dangled from the oak tree, her feet barely touching the ground. The mob circled below like vultures, their torches casting dancing shadows across faces twisted with righteous fury. Mud and worse things dripped from her torn dress, and her left eye had swollen shut from Jeremiah Crane's fist. "Witch," spat Martha Bellwether, hefting another stone. "You killed my boy with your devil's magic." Evangeline tried to speak, to explain that young Timothy had died of the fever that plagued half the settlement, but her throat was raw from screaming denials that fell on deaf ears. 3 days ago, she'd been the village healer. Now she was a condemned woman waiting for the flames. The crowd parted as Mayor Cornelius Thorne strode forward, his Bible clutched against his chest like armor. "Evangeline Ashworth," he intoned, "you stand accused of consorting with Satan and practicing the dark arts. Have you any final words before we cleanse this town of your evil?" She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with her one good eye. "I saved your daughter from the consumption, Cornelius. I delivered your grandson when he came breach. And this is how you repay." A war cry split the air like thunder. From the tree line burst a figure on horseback, moving faster than lightning across the clearing. The Apache warrior's painted face was a mask of controlled fury as he leaped from his mount, tomahawk gleaming in the firelight. The crowd scattered like startled chickens, screaming prayers and curses. But Evangeline saw only him, tall, bronze-skinned, with eyes like polished obsidian that seemed to see straight through to her soul. War paint adorned his high cheekbones in intricate patterns of red and black, and his long dark hair flowed behind him like a battle banner. With one swift motion, he cut her bonds. She collapsed into his arms, her legs unable to support her weight. He lifted her effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing at all. "Who are you?" she gasped. "Caelthera," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "And you are coming with me." Mayor Thorne had recovered from his shock and now advanced with his pistol drawn. "Release her, savage. She belongs to this town." Caelthera's eyes never left the mayor's face as he backed toward his horse. "This woman belongs to no one but herself. She's a witch, a murderess. She is a healer," Caelthera replied calmly, lifting Evangeline onto his horse before swinging up behind her. "And she will not burn today." The mayor's shot went wide as they thundered into the darkness. Evangeline pressed back against Caelthera's solid chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady against her spine. The settlement's torches grew smaller, behind them until they disappeared entirely, swallowed by the vast New Mexico night. They rode for what felt like hours before he finally slowed the horse near a stream. He dismounted and helped her down, his hands gentle despite their obvious strength. In the moonlight, she could see his face clearly for the first time. Angular features that spoke of noble lineage, a strong jaw, and those remarkable eyes that held depths she couldn't fathom. "Why?" she whispered, sinking to the grass beside the water. "Why would you save a woman like me?" He knelt beside her, producing a leather waterskin. As he carefully cleaned the blood from her split lip, his touch was infinitely tender. "Because you're worth it," he said simply. The words hit her like a physical blow. No one had ever said such a thing to her, not her dead husband, not the townspeople she'd served faithfully for 5 years. She'd been useful, necessary perhaps, but never worthy. "You don't even know me," she protested. "I know enough." His thumb traced the bruise on her cheek with feather-light precision. "I know you heal the sick without thought of payment. I know you delivered medicine to my people when the spotted sickness came, though it meant riding alone through dangerous territory. I know you nearly died saving children from the river when it flooded last spring." Evangeline stared at him in amazement. "You've been watching me." "For 3 moons, Caelthera admitted without shame. "My grandmother sent me to learn about the white woman who showed kindness to our people when others would sooner shoot us than speak to us." He rose and moved to his saddlebags, returning with dried meat and a blanket woven in beautiful patterns of turquoise and gold. As he wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, she caught his scent, sage and leather, wood smoke, and something wild and free that made her pulse quicken. "Your grandmother? Ayana, our medicine woman. She is very old and very wise. She has been having dreams about you. He settled beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Dreams of a woman with hair like sunlight and healing hands. Walking between two worlds, Evangeline touched her matted blonde hair self-consciously. I must look a fright. You look like a warrior who has survived battle. The simple honesty in his voice brought tears to her eyes. She'd grown accustomed to being valued only for what she could do, never for who she was. This man, this stranger, who'd risked his life for hers, spoke to her as if she were precious. I can't go back, she said suddenly, the reality of her situation crashing over her. They'll kill me if I return to Willowbrook. Then don't return. He handed her a piece of dried meat. My people could use a healer with your knowledge. I'm white. They'll never accept me. Kael'thara's laugh was low and rich. The Apache have a saying, judge a person not by the color of their skin, but by the color of their spirit. Yours burns bright, Evangeline Ashworth. She studied his profile in the moonlight. This man who'd already shown her more kindness than she'd known in years. What did your grandmother's dreams show her? Many things, a woman bringing healing to our children, a bridge between our peoples during a time of great conflict. And, he paused, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. And what? A love that would change the course of both our destinies. The words hung between them like a promise and a challenge. Evangeline's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd been married once, to a good man who'd treated her kindly but distantly, like a useful piece of furniture. She'd never experienced the kind of passion she'd read about in the few romance novels that had made their way to the frontier. Looking at Kael'thara, she began to understand what those authors had been trying to capture. I don't understand, she whispered. You don't know me. I could be all the terrible things they said. Are you? His question was direct, unflinching. No. The word came, out stronger than she'd expected. I've never harmed a soul. Everything I've done has been to heal, to help, to save lives. Then that is all I need to know. He stood and moved to tend his horse, giving her privacy to process everything that had happened. Evangeline pulled the blanket tighter and watched him work, noting the fluid grace of his movements, the careful attention he paid to his mounts. Needs? When he returned to sit beside her, she'd made a decision. If I come with you, what would be expected of me? Nothing more than to be yourself. Our people honor healers. You would have your own lodge, your independence. No one would force you into anything you didn't choose freely. And you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. A slow smile spread across his features, transforming his austere face into something breathtakingly handsome. I would hope to earn the right to court you properly, if you were willing. Court me? She almost laughed at the absurdity. I'm a widow with nothing to my name but the clothes on my back, and those are torn and filthy. What could I possibly offer someone like you? Kael'thara reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. You offer yourself, your courage, your compassion, your warrior's heart. Among my people, those qualities are worth more than all the gold in the white man's banks. Evangeline looked down at their joined hands, his dark bronze against her pale skin, his smooth and strong against her work-roughened fingers. The contrast should have seemed wrong, impossible. Instead, it felt perfect. I'm afraid, she admitted. Of me, of hoping for something I've never dared to dream of. His thumb stroked across her knuckles, sending shivers up her arm. Then let me help you learn to dream again. 3 weeks later, Evangeline knelt beside the pallet where 7-year-old Nalnish burned with fever, his small body racked with convulsions. Around her, the Apache camp watched with wary eyes as she worked, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle that had belonged to Ayana's grandmother. The old medicine woman sat in the shadows, her ancient eyes missing nothing as Evangeline combined white willow bark with echinacea and other native plants Ayana had taught her to identify. The blend of traditional Apache healing with Evangeline's European knowledge had proven powerful, but this child's illness was beyond anything she'd encountered. "The bad spirits have him," whispered Nalnish's mother Itzel, her face streaked with tears. "They will take him to the shadow world." Evangeline looked up from her preparation. In the weeks since Kyle Thera had brought her here, she'd learned enough Apache to communicate basic needs, but complex medical discussions still required translation. She turned to him where he crouched beside her. "Tell her I need to try something different. The fever is too high, his brain will be damaged if we don't break it soon." Kyle Thara spoke rapidly to Itzel, whose eyes widened in fear. She shook her head vehemently, backing away from Evangeline. "What did she say?" Evangeline demanded. "She fears you will use white man's magic that might steal her son's soul." Evangeline's heart sank. She'd been making progress earning the tribe's trust. But moments like these reminded her how fragile that acceptance remained. Several other tribal members had gathered, their faces grim. She recognized the look. It was the same expression she'd seen in Willowbrook just before they'd decided to hang her. But then Ayana's voice cut through the tension like a blade. The ancient woman spoke in rapid Apache, her tone brooking no argument. When she finished, the crowd reluctantly stepped back. "What did she say?" Evangeline asked. "That you have proven yourself with smaller ailments, and now the spirits test your true power. She said to use whatever method you know, that she will stand with you." Evangeline nodded gratefully to Ayana, then focused on the dying child. She'd seen this exact presentation once before, in a Philadelphia hospital where she'd trained briefly as a young woman. The doctor there had used ice baths to break catastrophic fevers, a technique considered radical even among white physicians. "Need cold water," she told Kael'thara. "As much as we can get, as cold as possible. And I need the men to break up ice from the stream." For the next hour, they worked together in grim determination. Evangeline stripped the child and immersed him in the improvised ice bath, while Kael'thara held the boy's mother, who wailed as if watching her son being tortured. The other Apache watched in horrified fascination as Evangeline monitored the child's pulse and breathing. Just when she began to fear she'd killed him herself, Nalnish's eyes fluttered open. His fever had broken, and though he was weak and disoriented, he was alive. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Itzel threw herself at Evangeline's feet, sobbing her gratitude in Apache. The other tribal members pressed closer, touching Evangeline's hands and arms with something approaching reverence. Ayana hobbled over and placed a weathered hand on Evangeline's shoulder. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of prophecy. "What did she say?" Evangeline asked when Kael'thara's translation didn't come immediately. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. "She said you are truly the bridge walker from her dreams, the one who will unite the healing wisdom of both peoples." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She said the spirits have marked you as one of us now, completely." That night, as Evangeline sat outside her small lodge tending to her herb supplies, Kael'thara approached with 2 cups of tea. She'd grown accustomed to these evening visits, treasuring the quiet conversations that had helped her learn not just the Apache language but their ways of seeing the world. "You were magnificent today," he said, settling beside her on the woven mat. "I was terrified," she admitted, accepting the tea gratefully. "What if I'd been wrong? What if the treatment had killed him? But you weren't wrong. And even if you had been, you would have acted from love and knowledge, not fear or hatred." He studied her profile in the firelight. "Do you understand what happened today? Beyond saving Nalnish's life," Evangeline shook her head. "You became one of us, truly. The final barriers fell away." He reached for her hand, his touch sending familiar warmth through her veins. "My grandmother has asked me to speak with you about something important." Her pulse quickened. "What?" "She wishes to perform the adoption ceremony, to formally welcome you as a daughter of the tribe." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But there is more. She believes the spirits have shown her that our paths are meant to join as one." Evangeline set down her tea with shaking hands. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that my grandmother, the wisest woman I know, believes we are meant to be husband and wife." His dark eyes searched her face. "And I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you, Evangeline. Completely, irrevocably." The words she'd dreamed of hearing hung in the air between them, but with them came a flood of old fears and doubts. "Kyle-Thara, She stopped, overwhelmed by the intensity of her own feelings. "I love you too, but I'm still healing from everything that happened. The betrayal, the fear, the way people I trusted turned against me. I know." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. "And I would wait 1,000 seasons for you to feel safe again, but I wanted you to know where my heart stands." She looked into his eyes and saw patience, devotion, and a love so pure it took her breath away. This man had saved her life, asked nothing in return, and shown her a gentleness she'd never known existed. "Ask me again," she whispered. "What?" "Ask me again in your language." "The way your people would." A slow smile spread across his features. He shifted to kneel before her, taking both her hands in his. When he spoke, his voice resonated with emotion and ancient ritual. Though she didn't understand every word, the meaning was clear in his tone, his posture, his eyes. He was asking her to be his wife, his partner, his equal in all things. "Yes," she said simply. The wedding ceremony took place during the full moon, when Ayana proclaimed the spirits were most receptive to new unions. Evangeline wore a dress of soft deerskin, decorated with intricate beadwork that the women of the tribe had created for her, a gesture of acceptance that brought tears to her eyes. Kyle-Thara stood magnificent in his ceremonial regalia, eagle, feathers woven into his long hair, and a breastplate of polished bone adorning his broad chest. As they faced each other in the sacred circle, surrounded by the entire tribe, Evangeline felt the last of her old life fall away like shed skin. Ayana performed the ritual in the ancient tongue, binding their hands with braided sweetgrass while blessing their union with smoke from burning sage. When she placed the marriage necklace around Evangeline's throat, turquoise and silver worked into symbols of healing and protection. Evangeline understood she wasn't just gaining a husband, but an entire family. The celebration lasted deep into the night. Evangeline found herself swept into dances she'd never learned but somehow understood, fed delicacies by women who'd once viewed her with suspicion, blessed by warriors who now called her sister. But it was the moment when Kyle-Thara led her to their marriage lodge that her breath caught. He'd prepared everything himself, soft furs covering the floor, candles made from animal fat casting warm light over the interior, and gifts laid out with careful precision. "These are for you," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "tokens of my devotion." There was a knife with a handle carved from elk antler, its blade sharp enough to perform the finest surgical work, a medicine bag made from the hide of a white buffalo, so rare it was considered sacred, and a small wooden box that, when opened, revealed a necklace of polished amber stones. "My mother wore this," he explained, lifting the necklace with reverent hands. "And her mother before her. It's said to bring wisdom and long life to the healer who wears it." As he fastened it around her neck, his fingers brushing her nape, Evangeline shivered with anticipation. She'd been married before, but the mechanical joining she'd known with her first husband bore no resemblance to the desire coursing through her now. "I have something for you too," she whispered, producing a small bundle from beneath her wedding dress. Inside was a shirt made from the finest linen she'd managed to obtain from a trading post, sewn with stitches so small they were nearly invisible. But more importantly, she'd embroidered it with symbols that bridged both their worlds. Apache signs for strength and protection, intertwined with Celtic knots representing eternal love. Kyle-Thara held the shirt against his chest, his eyes bright with moisture. "You honor both my heritage and yours, as you have honored mine by loving all of me, not just the parts that were convenient." He set the shirt aside and cupped her face in his strong hands. "Evangeline, are you certain? Once we join as husband and wife, there can be no going back to your old world. Are you ready to be Apache completely?" She thought of Willowbrook, of the people who'd been so quick to condemn her. Then she looked around the lodge that would be her home, thought of the tribe that had accepted her healing gifts without question, of the man before her who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. "I've never been more certain of anything," she said. When he kissed her, it was with a reverence that made her feel like something precious and rare. His hands trembled as they traced her face, her throat, the curve of her shoulder revealed as her wedding dress slipped away. Their joining was nothing like the hurried, dutiful coupling she'd known before. Kyle Thara worshipped her body with, his hands and lips taking time to learn what brought her pleasure, what made her gasp and arch beneath his touch. When she wept from the intensity of sensations she'd never experienced, he kissed away her tears and whispered Apache endearments against her skin. In the flickering candlelight, their bodies moved together with increasing urgency, two souls finally finding their perfect match. When completion finally claimed them both, Evangeline understood what the poets meant when they wrote of love that could shake the earth itself. Later, as they lay entwined in the soft furs, Kelthera traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Do you know what your name means in Apache?" he asked sleepily. "Tell me." "Evangeline, we would call you Desba. It means she who brings life from death." She turned in his arms to study his face. "Is that how you see me?" "It's how everyone sees you now. You came to us broken and hunted, but you've become our greatest healer. You've brought hope where there was despair." His hand moved to rest over her heart. "You brought me back to life when I thought I'd never love again." "What do you mean?" His expression grew distant. "I was married before. She died in a cavalry raid 3 winters ago. I thought my heart had died with her." His eyes refocused on Evangeline's face. "But you showed me that love isn't finite. The heart can hold new love without betraying the old." Evangeline felt a pang of jealousy, quickly followed by understanding. She'd loved her first husband in her way, just as Kale Thara had loved his first wife. But what they shared was deeper, more complete, a meeting of minds and souls as well as bodies. "Will you tell me about her?" she asked. "Someday, when the memories are less sharp." He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "Tonight is for us, for new beginnings." As she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, Evangeline reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she'd been a lonely widow going through the motions of life. Tomorrow, she would wake as a beloved wife and respected medicine woman, among people who valued her for exactly who she was. But it was the man beside her, this gentle warrior who'd risked everything to save a stranger, who had given her the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that she was worth loving, worth saving, worth choosing every day. 2 years into their marriage, Evangeline had become more than just the tribe's healer. She was their bridge to the changing world. As tensions escalated between the Apache and the encroaching settlers, her unique position as a white woman who'd chosen to become Apache made her invaluable. She was grinding willow bark in front of their lodge when the sound of approaching horses made her look up. A cavalry patrol rode into camp under a white flag, led by a man whose uniform marked him as a colonel. The Apache warriors moved to defensive positions without appearing to do so, while Evangeline instinctively reached for the rifle Kelthara had taught her to use. "I'm looking for a woman named Evangeline Ashworth," the colonel called out. "I have reason to believe she's being held captive here." Kelthara emerged from their lodge, his hand resting casually on his knife hilt. "There is no captive by that name in this camp." "Sir, I have reports that this woman was abducted from the settlement of Willowbrook 2 years ago. We are here to negotiate her release." Evangeline stood, her heart pounding. She recognized the colonel now, Marcus Whitmore, a man with a reputation for fairness who'd served with distinction in the Mexican War. Behind him rode 6 soldiers, and, to her shock, Mayor Cornelius Thorne from Willowbrook. "That's her," Thorne shouted, pointing directly at Evangeline. "That's the witch who murdered our children." The atmosphere instantly shifted from tense to explosive. Apache warriors stepped forward, arrows nocked but not yet drawn. The soldiers raised their rifles in response. "Stand down," Colonel Whitmore barked to his men. then turned to study Evangeline with intelligent eyes. "Ma'am, are you Evangeline Ashworth?" Evangeline felt the weight of two worlds pressing down on her. She could lie, deny her identity, and trust her adopted family to protect her. Or she could speak the truth and see where it led. "I was," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "I am now Desba, wife of Thara, daughter of the Chiricahua Apache." Thorne sputtered in outrage, but Colonel Whitmore held up a hand for silence. "Ma'am, you're saying you chose to remain with these people. I'm saying they saved my life when my own people decided to murder me for crimes I didn't commit." Evangeline stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "I'm saying I've found more honor and decency among the Apache than I ever knew among the Christians of Willowbrook." "She's been brainwashed," Thorne insisted, "forced into some heathen marriage against her will. Colonel, we have a duty to rescue her." Thara moved to stand beside his wife, his presence both protective and supportive. "The woman speaks for herself, as is her right." Colonel Whitmore studied the couple with growing understanding. He'd seen enough of frontier life to recognize genuine affection when he encountered it. The way the Apache woman, for that's clearly what she'd become, leaned slightly toward her husband. The way his hand found hers without conscious thought spoke of a real partnership. "Mrs. Forgive me, what should I call you?" "Desba will suffice." "Desba, then, I need to ask you directly and I need you to answer honestly. Are you here against your will?" Evangeline looked around the camp that had become her home. She saw Itzel watching anxiously with little Nalnish, now a healthy, laughing child. She saw Ayana sitting in the shade of her lodge, ancient eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. She saw the faces of people who'd welcomed her, protected her, loved her for exactly who she was. "No," she said firmly, "I am exactly where I choose to be." "The woman's clearly been corrupted by these savages," Thorne protested. "Colonel, think of your duty." "My duty," Whitmore interrupted, coldly, "is to the truth, and the truth is that this woman appears to be here by her own free will." He turned back to Evangeline. "However, there are serious accusations against you from Willowbrook. 3 more children have died of fever since you left, and these people claim you cursed them." Evangeline felt ice in her veins. "More children died?" "The Harper twins and young Rebecca Mills, all presenting with the same symptoms that killed Timothy Bellwether." "Because it's the same disease," Evangeline exclaimed. "A fever that comes with the hot months when the water gets low and stagnant. I tried to warn them about boiling water, about quarantine procedures, but they were too busy calling me a witch to listen." She turned to Thara, speaking rapidly in Apache. He nodded grimly and disappeared into their lodge, returning with a leather-bound journal. "I've been keeping records," she told the colonel, offering him the book. "Every case I treated in Willowbrook, every recommendation I made that they ignored, and I've been tracking the same fever patterns here. Look at the dates." Colonel Whitmore accepted the journal, his eyebrows rising as he scanned the meticulous entries. "These are quite detailed medical observations. I was trained in Philadelphia before I married and came west. I know the difference between natural disease and supernatural causes." Evangeline's voice carried the authority of someone who'd fought death and won more often than she'd lost. "The children in Willowbrook died because their parents preferred superstition to medicine." "Lies!" Thorne spat. "She's a witch, I tell you. She cursed our town." "Then explain this," Evangeline said, pulling a letter from her medicine bag. "I wrote this to your town physician before I was arrested. In it, I predicted exactly when and how the fever would return if proper sanitation measures weren't taken. The date on this letter is 3 months before those children died." Colonel Whitmore read the letter twice, his expression growing more troubled with each word. When he looked up, his gaze had shifted to Thorne with something approaching disgust. "Mr. Thorne, it appears this woman tried to warn your settlement about a disease outbreak and was ignored. Instead of heeding medical advice, you attempted to execute your only qualified healer." "She's a witch," Thorne repeated, but his voice lacked conviction now. "She's a doctor," Whitmore said flatly, "and from what I can see, a damn good one." He closed the journal and handed it back to Evangeline. Ma'am, you're free to remain where you choose. And Mr. Thorne, you're under arrest for attempted murder. The colonel's words sent shockwaves through both groups. Thorne began protesting violently while his escort moved to restrain him, and several Apache warriors stepped closer, uncertain whether this was some sort of trap. Colonel, Evangeline said quickly, I don't want revenge, I just want to be left in peace. Whitmore studied her face, seeing the compassion there despite everything she'd endured. That's your choice, ma'am. But I can't ignore an attempted lynching. When it's brought to my attention, what if there was another way? Evangeline glanced at Thara, who nodded encouragingly. What if instead of punishment there could be understanding? I'm listening. Evangeline took a deep breath, formulating a plan that could change everything for both peoples. The children who died in Willowbrook, they didn't have to die. Neither do any future victims of diseases that we know how to prevent and treat. What if we established a proper medical exchange? What do you mean? I mean Apache healing knowledge combined with European medical techniques. A training program where young people from both cultures could learn from each other. Her voice grew stronger as the vision took shape. We could set up a clinic at the boundary between territories, staffed by healers from both peoples. Colonel Whitmore's eyes sharpened with interest. You're talking about preventing conflicts before they start, sick people seeking help instead of raiding for medicine. Exactly, and more than that, understanding. When people work together to save lives, they start seeing each other as human beings instead of enemies. Thara spoke up, his English carefully chosen for maximum impact. My wife's medicine has saved many Apache lives, but she also carries knowledge of white man's diseases that kill our children. This sharing could benefit both peoples. Thorne, now in shackles, snarled his disapproval. You can't trust these savages. They'll use any medical knowledge against us. The way your people used medical knowledge against me? Evangeline asked quietly. By ignoring it completely and calling it witchcraft? Colonel Whitmore was quiet for several long moments, clearly weighing the proposal. Finally, he nodded slowly. I think this could work. The territorial governor has been looking for ways to reduce conflicts without resorting to military action. A joint medical facility could be exactly what we need. There would have to be protections, Thara said. Sacred ground where no violence is permitted. Warriors from both sides would have to agree to the peace. And proper funding, Evangeline added. Medical supplies, equipment, housing for the staff. This can't be done halfway. I can present the proposal to the governor, Whitmore agreed. But I'll need a formal agreement from your chief, and written commitment from from Desba here to head up the program. Ayana, who had been listening to the translated conversation, rose from her seat and approached the group. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of prophecy fulfilled. She says, Thara translated, that this is what her dreams showed her, the Bridgewalker bringing healing to both peoples, ending cycles of violence with wisdom instead of war. Over the next several hours, the basic framework was established. The clinic would be built at Copper Springs, halfway between Willowbrook and the Apache territory. It would be staffed by volunteers from both cultures and protected by a treaty that made it neutral ground. Most importantly, Evangeline would serve as the head physician with full authority to train practitioners in combined healing techniques. As the soldiers prepared to leave with their prisoner, Colonel Whitmore approached. Evangeline, one last time. Are you certain about this? You're taking on an enormous responsibility, and there will be people on both sides who see you as a traitor. Evangeline looked around at the life she'd built, her husband standing proudly beside her, her adopted family watching with trust and affection, the sense of purpose that filled her days. Then she thought of the children who had died needlessly, and the ones who could be saved if people would just listen to wisdom instead of fear. Colonel, 2 years ago I dangled from a rope because people preferred ignorance to understanding. If I can prevent others from suffering the same fate, on either side, then the risk is worth it. That night, as she and Thara lay in their marriage bed discussing the monumental changes ahead, he traced gentle patterns on her bare shoulder. Are you frightened? He asked. Terrified. she admitted, but also excited. This could change everything, Kyle Thara. We could actually create peace between our peoples, or we could fail spectacularly and make things worse. She turned to face him, studying his beloved features in the moonlight filtering through the lodge walls. Do you think we should try? I think, he said, pulling her close, that my grandmother didn't have prophetic dreams about a bridge walker just so we could ignore the opportunity when it came. He kissed her forehead tenderly. Besides, I've seen you bring the dead back to life. Building peace should be simple in comparison. Evangeline laughed, the sound rich with joy and determination. When you put it that way, I do have one condition, he said, his voice growing serious. What? We do this together. I won't have my wife facing the dangers alone. Where you go, I go. She felt her heart swell with love for this man who'd saved her in every way a person could be saved. Together, she agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of hope and forever. 5 years later, the Copper Springs Medical Center stood as a testament to what was possible when people chose cooperation over conflict. The complex of adobe buildings housed not just a fully equipped hospital, but also a school where young healers from both cultures learned side by side, and research facilities where ancient remedies were studied with modern methods. Evangeline stood in the main treatment room, her hands steady as she sutured a knife wound on a young cowboy who'd been foolish enough to cheat at cards in the wrong saloon. Beside her worked Nalnish, now 12 and already showing remarkable aptitude for medicine under her tutelage. The muscle fibers need to be aligned precisely, she instructed in Apache, then repeated in English for the benefit of her other student, a freckled girl from the nearby settlement of Cedar Ridge. If we don't match them properly, he'll have permanent weakness in that arm. Both children nodded solemnly, their attention complete. It still amazed Evangeline how natural it seemed to them, this blending of worlds that had once appeared impossible. To Nalnish and little Rebecca, working together to save lives was simply what healers did. Dr. Desba. The voice belonged to James Thornfield, a young cavalry officer who served as liaison between the medical center and the territorial government. There's someone here to see you. Evangeline looked up from her work, noting the officer's troubled expression. Can it wait? This patient needs... It's your husband, ma'am, and he's brought visitors. Something in Thornfield's tone made her pulse quicken. She quickly finished the suture and left instructions with her students before following him to the main entrance. There she found Kale Thara standing with 3 Apache warriors she didn't recognize, their war paint and formal dress indicating they were on official business. What's wrong? She asked in Apache. The tallest of the visitors stepped forward, his scarred face grim with purpose. I am Cochise, war chief of the Chiricahua. I have come to speak with the bridgewalker about a matter of great importance. Evangeline's breath caught. Cochise's reputation was legendary, a brilliant tactician and fierce warrior who thus far resisted all attempts at peaceful negotiation with the whites. His presence here could mean either unprecedented opportunity or terrible danger. I am honored by your visit, war chief. How may I serve you? Cochise studied her with intelligent dark eyes, taking in her Apache dress, the sacred necklace at her throat, the confident way she carried herself. My youngest son burns with the spotted sickness. My medicine men say he will die, but I have heard of miraculous healings at this place. Evangeline felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. Cochise's son, if she could save him, it might open doors to lasting peace. If she failed, bring him to me immediately, she said without hesitation. Within the hour, the medical center buzzed with barely controlled tension as Cochise's party arrived with the sick child. The boy, perhaps 8 years old, was indeed critically ill with what Evangeline immediately recognized as severe smallpox. His fever raged, his breathing was labored, and the characteristic pustules covered most of his small body. As she examined him surrounded by anxious Apache warriors and curious medical staff, Evangeline's mind raced through treatment options. Smallpox was often fatal, especially in children. but she developed some innovative supportive care techniques by combining Apache fever reduction methods with European medical knowledge. "I won't lie to you," she told Cochise. "Your son is very ill, but I believe we can save him if you trust me completely. What do you need? Time, privacy, and your word that no matter what treatments I use, you won't interfere." Cochise glanced at his warriors, then back at Evangeline. "You have seen for 3 days and nights?" Evangeline barely left the child's bedside. She used every technique she knew: willow bark teas to reduce fever, cooling baths with Apache medicinal herbs, careful monitoring of fluid balance, and most crucially, a revolutionary new treatment she'd been developing that involved deliberate exposure to a milder form of the disease to build immunity. Thara stayed by her side throughout, helping with the nursing care and serving as translator when the boy was conscious enough to respond. On the second night, when the child's fever spiked dangerously high, she found herself praying to both the Christian God of her childhood and the Apache spirits that had become equally real to her. "He's not going to make it," whispered Dr. Morrison, a young physician who'd recently arrived from Boston to study at the center. "His fever's too high, his pulse is failing." "He's going to make it," Evangeline said firmly, adjusting the cooling cloths around the boy's burning body. "Because he has to." On the morning of the 4th day, the fever finally broke. The child's eyes opened clear and focused for the first time since his arrival, and he whispered a request for water in a voice that, while weak, was undeniably alive. Cochise, who had maintained stoic vigil throughout the crisis, closed his eyes briefly. When Evangeline delivered the news, when he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "My son will live? Your son will live. He'll need weeks to recover his strength. But the disease has been defeated." The war chief stood silent for a long moment, then slowly removed a necklace of polished silver and turquoise from around his neck. "This belonged to my father, and his father before him. I give it to you in recognition of a debt that can never be repaid." As he placed the precious necklace around Evangeline's throat, she felt the symbolic weight of what was happening. This wasn't just gratitude for healing a sick child. It was acceptance from the most powerful Apache leader, recognition of her place in their world. "There is more," Cochise continued. "I have come to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" "Become our peace negotiator. You understand both worlds, you have proven your wisdom and courage. Help us find a path forward that doesn't end in the destruction of my people." Evangeline looked at Thara, seeing pride and support in his beloved face. Then she thought of all the conflicts that could be prevented, all the lives that could be saved on both sides. "I accept," she said simply. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything the territory had ever seen. Instead of military leaders threatening each other across a table, the discussions took place at the medical center, with Evangeline serving as both translator and mediator. Her unique position, trusted by the Apache as family, respected by the whites as a skilled physician, gave her the credibility to broker agreements that had seemed impossible. The final treaty, signed on a crisp autumn day 6 months later, established the first permanent reservation with genuine autonomy for the Apache people. It guaranteed them rights to their traditional lands, established formal trade relationships, and, most importantly, created a framework for peaceful coexistence based on mutual respect rather than military dominance. As Evangeline watched Cochise and Colonel Whitmore shake hands over the signed documents, she felt Thara's arm slip around her waist. "Proud of you," he whispered against her ear. "We did this together," she replied, leaning into his warmth. "No," said a familiar voice behind them. They turned to find Ayana, now ancient and frail but still sharp as a blade. She did this because she finally understood the answer to her own question. "What question, grandmother?" Thara asked. The old woman's eyes twinkled with deep satisfaction. "The night she came to us, broken and lost, she asked why anyone would save a woman like her. She has spent these years learning." "The answer?" "And what is the answer?" Evangeline asked softly. "That the question was wrong from the beginning. Ayana reached out to touch Evangeline's cheek with a weathered hand. It was never about why you deserved to be saved. It was about why the world deserved to have you in it. As the celebration continued around them, Evangeline reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She'd begun as a woman who saw herself as useful at best, disposable at worst. But through love, first from this man who'd risked everything to save her, then from a people who'd welcomed her as family, and finally from herself, she'd discovered her true worth. That evening, as she and Kyle Thara walked hand in hand through their transformed world, she realized that her story had become exactly what Ayana had prophesied: a bridge between worlds, a testament to the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Do you ever regret it? Thara asked as they paused to watch the sunset paint the desert sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Leaving your old life behind. Evangeline considered the question seriously, thinking of the woman she'd been, afraid, doubting her own worth, accepting scraps of affection as though they were treasures. Then she looked at the life she'd built. Meaningful work that saved lives daily, a marriage based on true partnership and passionate love, a community that valued her not just for what she could do, but for who she was. I didn't leave my old life behind, she said finally. I left my old prison behind. This is the life I was always meant to live. As if summoned by her words, a young couple approached them, one of her first mixed-culture medical students, an Apache woman who'd married a former cavalry officer, both of them now serving as healers in outlying settlements. Dr. Desba, the woman called out, "We wanted to thank you again for everything you've taught us. We just received word that we're expecting our first child." Evangeline embraced them both, her heart full to bursting. This was her true legacy, not just the lives she'd saved directly, but the bridges she'd built, the love she'd nurtured, the proof that different worlds could not just coexist, but create something more beautiful together than either could achieve alone. Later that night, as she lay in her husband's arms under a canopy of desert stars, Evangeline thought once more about the question that had haunted her for so long. Why would you save a woman like me? Now she knew the answer that Thara had understood from the very beginning. Because love sees worth where the world sees worthlessness. Because every soul has the potential for greatness if given the chance to bloom. Because sometimes saving one person creates ripples that transform everything. I love you, Desba, Thara murmured against her hair, using the name that had become more truly hers than the one she'd been born with. And I love you, my heart, she replied, knowing that those simple words contained the entire universe, of their shared journey from a desperate rescue to a love that had literally changed the world. In the distance, coyotes sang their ancient songs to the moon, and Evangeline smiled, finally understanding that she was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the person she was meant to love, living exactly the life she was born to create. The bridge walker had found her way home,